Guys, so we'll get started on a speed seminar here. What we'll talk about briefly is speed flying, and then we're going to go over the model itself, and then we can move on to drag racing. So how many people have actually flown speed before? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. All right, good. So speed flying is pretty straightforward. The speed cup that we run at MHSFA is simple. It's like the Bonneville time trials, you know, the salt flats. So you do best speed in one direction, upwind, best speed the other direction, usually downwind, and then you average the two. So that's what we're looking for on the passes. We do a left to right pass and a right to left pass. We take the times that we've calculated based on the electronic timing system that we have built, and then you take the lowest time in each direction, convert that to a speed over the course, and then that average gives you your final official score, okay? So pretty straightforward. The speed flying itself, it's really nice because it doesn't require you to be able to do all the crazy 3D things. I will tell you, especially if you're a beginner, as deceptively simple as it seems to go in one direction straight, you got to be careful because orientations play a pretty big role in speed. So I definitely suggest that you are good with your side-in orientations, not necessarily hovering, although that would be preferable, but at least side-in orientations during flight. So if you can do figure eights in both directions, inside and outside figure eights, or circuits in both directions, then that really helps. The other thing you're going to need to know how to do in the very least is a stall turn. There are more advanced maneuvers that I'll talk about in a little bit, but the stall turn is pretty key to the speed flight, because what that allows you to do is turn yourself around and get set up for the next pass. So we'll use the Mini Comet as our example here. Very simply, what we want to do is we're going to take off. We always make sure that we check that the model is okay before we go to idle up, okay? The stresses that we're putting on these machines are high. Oftentimes people end up running their machines well in excess of the manufacturer's recommendations. We were actually having a conversation over here a few minutes ago about the fact that typical head speeds on a 700 speed machine are between 2,500 and 2,800 RPM, okay? Most people don't run much above 21. If you're Duncan, maybe you're at 22 or 23 if you really want it to be hot. We're another 200 above that to even be remotely competitive. And if you guys saw me spool up and check out the TDR2 on the main flight line last night, my full speed idle up is 2,700. So there's a lot of stress on the system. We always do inspections of the models after, before and after each flight. It's not before and after each day of flying, it's each flight, okay? So to start out, we're going to inspect your models. You're required to go through a formal inspection that we've put together at MHSFA to make sure that we check all the main stuff. We go over the head linkages, we go over the blades, tail linkages, tail blades, make sure that the fuselage or the frame is still solid, batteries secure, motors secure, there are no wires that are hanging out. This one always shocks people, so I'm going to give you guys a heads up now if you're thinking of competing. You have to have some form of wire retention going into your receiver and flybarless system. That means it's hot glued or it's double-sided tape. There are no exceptions. Don't take offense if I tell you you're not allowed to fly until you fix it. It's actually a common catch because people just don't think about it, right? I think it's a good best practice even for 3D, but for speed it's absolutely necessary, because if you're ripping by at 150 and a wire comes out, it doesn't take long for stuff to go bad really, really quick. Okay, so we'll inspect your models. We're going to go off to the flight line, which we've had cut down a little bit lower, so it's easier to take off and land on. And what you want to do is basically lift it into a hover. I like to do a full pirouette or two in each direction, make sure I'm not hearing any noises on the tail. That's one thing you got to watch out for, because the tail is very important in this. check for drivetrain sounds, that sort of a thing. And then we never go up into the full speed idle up until we're further out. And what I like to actually do is get it moving in forward flight in the direction that I'm going to start from, and then go idle up from there. And you can listen again, make sure that everything's working perfectly fine, and you get set up for your pass. So when we get set up for our pass, what we're basically going to do here is bring the helicopter to the end of the course, and we're going to pull up, okay? Get yourself straight. You're going to do your pirouette so that your nose is facing down, and then you're going to come back into the run. When we come back into the run, initially we want 0 pitch at the top of the stall turn so that we can actually use gravity to pull us down a little bit, okay? And then as we start getting to the right altitude, we start feathering in back elevator, and when we get to about a 10 to 15 degree down angle on the nose, we better be at full collective. Okay, the speed helis do not go very fast when they're flat like a 3D heli, because if you think about it, a large portion of what gets us the speed is the thrust that we're getting off of this main rotor, and you have to present that main rotor at an angle to the direction of flight, or you're not going to get a lot of forward thrust. You're just going to get a lot of lift. And so oftentimes you'll see beginners they get set up, they got a solid angle, and then they pull through and they freak out a little bit because it looks like nose down here, you're going to go straight into the ground. And so they flatten it out, and then they give it collective, and then you get the balloon, and it comes up, okay? So watch out for that. But let's say you set the angle correctly, okay? You're coming through the course. The best way to hold solid speed is to not touch anything, okay? So you set it and you forget it. Let it go to the end of the course, all right? And then when you get to the end, as you begin your pull out, you want to, with your thumbs coordinated, you want to start feathering out collective. Now, I don't know how it works on mode 1, man. That's going to screw me up. So you just figure it out in your head and do the translation, okay? All right, so you're going to feather out collective and feather in backward elevator. So to your thumbs, it actually looks like this. You're going down on both sticks, okay? And you got to feel it out. The reason for that is if you start feathering in back elevator and you don't have collective down, okay, then you can get yourself into trouble. You can do pitch ups. You can put a lot of stress on the heli and actually damage things, or you can blow up the batteries and the power system. That's usually what ends up happening. Believe it or not, when you're beginning, the highest currents that you see on your power system are not coming into the run at full collective. They're pulling out of the run. Okay? So, That's the general layout of the course. What we want to talk about now is sighting things. So how do you actually get set up? Okay, so now what we're going to do, since we got through the first pass example, we're going to talk about exactly how to sight the heli. Everyone does it a little bit differently. In 3D, people pick a portion of the heli that they look at, right? I'm a big fan of looking at the skids and looking at the tail for orientation. Some people like the canopy. Some people, just do the head, whatever. But in speed, I find it's a little bit more universal with a couple of exceptions, depending on who you are and what you look for. For me, the disc is super, super important on speed. And the reason is because the distances that we're running are so huge that oftentimes the body itself, even if it's a fuselage model, it's tricky to get visual cues that tell you where things are. So if we're pulling up into a stall turn here, okay, I'm on this little guy. Let's put it into perspective. The small course is 120 meters in length, okay? That's 196 feet from center flight station on each side. That's a 400-foot course. So this thing's now 200 feet away, and you can see the small orange flags out there. That's the boundary on the left-hand side of the small course, okay? I can't look at this fuselage and determine that I'm actually rolled a little bit, right? So you're trying to keep everything smooth, but as you come through here, maybe you're a little jittery, you're a little nervous, you bump the aileron, and now I got a little bit of a tilt. So I pulled up like this, okay? Now what happens if I don't right that tilt? I'm gonna go and rotate about my head axis, still have the tilt, how did I do it? Yeah, have the tilt in, and now when I pull back out, I'm going away from the course. Okay, so it's super important for you to get a straight line through the course, because if you don't, then your speed suffers too. It's not just a safety issue, it's a speed thing. The shortest distance between the pylons is right down the line that connect those two dots. If you start at the inside pylon and you do a run to the outside pylon on the opposite side, you've actually added a fair amount of distance, and your time's going to show that. So it's slower, okay? So the way we check for roll, we pull up into the stall turn here, and so everyone does the sequencing different, but I'll walk you through my sequencing. Get into the stall turn. First things first, I want to get this thing set so that the nose is in the right spot, okay? Now, I'm looking at the head, looking at the disc, and what I'm looking for on the disc is the light reflecting off the blades, okay? They're spinning really fast, so you don't see the individual blades, you see a big circle. With little inputs on aileron and elevator, I can see how the light reflections change on the disc, and that gives me a feel for where it's oriented in roll and in pitch, okay, in elevator. So what I'll first do is I get up here, and this is why doing good solid stall turns is important, because you need hang time. The more hang time you can get yourself a second or two to get everything sighted out. You get up here, you're hanging, you're starting to move down, do a little bit of aileron twitch, okay, get it centered. So now the disc is solid, left to right. Little bit of elevator twitch, and you get it centered so that it's actually pointing straight down. The elevator is just as important, because a lot of times you don't understand that you're actually nose down, and now when you start applying collective and pulling through, you're gonna smack the ground. The other side of it is, if it's this way, you're presenting a larger area of the disc to the air as you're falling, and that actually slows you. It kind of acts like a parachute, like an auto rotation. So you want it to be pointed straight down, okay? Once you get all that set, you come through, and again, at about, you want to anticipate when you're coming into this. About halfway down the fall, you start applying collective, and you start pulling back on elevator, and then by about 10 to 15 degrees nose down, you've got as much elevator as you're going to get. Here's the key. Do not try to put collective. Do not try to put more collective in at that point, because it's just going to balloon and it's going to slow you down. If you don't feel like you got a good pass, get to the other side of the field, reset, and start it over again. You will go slower if you try to add the remainder of the collective once you've gotten to this point than if you just feather in until your thumb can't get any further and then stop and hold it. Okay? And then again, as you're coming through the pass, don't touch anything. It's roughly, if you look at it, doing enough testing and flying and GPSing, every time you twitch the elevator or the tail, you're going to lose a couple of miles per hour. And it adds up really quickly. So you want the model to just stay straight and level, okay? And then that takes us to the importance of the tune on these guys. So tuning a speed heli is completely different than tuning a 3D heli. The name of the game on speed is low gain. The reason it is low gain is because we're spinning the head so high in RPM, and typically we use blades that are CG'd a little bit further out span-wise, heavier. We've got a lot of energy built up in this head, and it actually acts to naturally stabilize the body of the helicopter. So you don't need as much head gain. If you get too much head gain, what you're going to see characteristically is a wobble, okay? So if you're coming across the sky and you're seeing a wobble, or you're seeing like a dolphin or a porpoise, that typically means you've got too much head gain and you just want to tune it down. On most flybarless systems, what's everyone flying? V-bar? Anyone V-bar? Brain? Beast-X? Icon? That kind of thing? Bavarian Demon? Most of the head gains on those are going to be in the range of 40 to 60 on the number scale, compared to, I think, usually in 3D on bigger birds, you're in the 70s, 80s, 90s, something like that. Okay? Tail, the gain's going to be really low for a different reason, though. You can get yourself into a tail wag, but it's not actually all that typical. The reason why it's important to have a lower tail gain is because at the speeds that we're traveling, we don't need the tail authority, because the helicopter will naturally weather vane to stay straight. And now all we're trying to do is minimize how much power loss we get to the tail. You want to put as much juice to the head as you can get there, because that's where your thrust is coming from. Any power that is put to the tail to hold that in place is actually power that you're not putting into directly generating thrust for more speed. So we run the tail gains super low. Rule of thumb for me, as uncomfortable and weird as it sounds, is I bring my heli up into a hover at a safe distance, check everything, go to my idle up for speed, and then I do a pitch pump. And if my tail doesn't kick out 45 to 90 degrees in that hard pitch pump, then my tail gain's probably too high. Okay? That's how sloppy it needs to be. So it favors flybarless system and radio combos that allow you to do bank switching, especially for people that don't want to commit fully, because you can set up a bank for speed only and then leave your other two banks for 3D or precision or whatever it is that you want to do. For the setup of the heli itself, mechanically, power system wise, until you start getting into really crazy stuff, you can do it with a normal 3D heli. Okay, there's nothing particularly important about the power system or the airframe that's going to get you to go faster or slower in most of the 3D helis. You guys let me know when we get done what helis you're planning on trying to fly with, and I can go over the pros and cons of those or what to look for. We've seen it all at this point. Aligns, Gowies, SABs, Mikados. We've seen gassers. We've seen nitros. They all work pretty darn good. Okay. Any questions on the speed stuff?
Power loss do you figure you get out of the tail when you have your gain?
On 3D gains, you lose probably about an excess of 10 to 15% in power that you wouldn't need to do. What?
If somebody has a question, maybe.
Oh. Fuck, man. I'm forgetting that I'm actually doing. Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
How much power loss do you usually get when if your tail gain is too high?
So if your tail gain is tuned for 3D, you're looking at probably 10 to 15% power loss. So it's super important to make sure that you get the tail tuned correctly. It's not as much a flying confidence thing as the power loss. The head, though, it's all about flying confidence, okay? Last topic, if you guys don't have any questions on the speed stuff, is pitch ups. Okay, everyone comes here for the first time and gets freaked out about pitch ups. The technical term for it is retreating blade stall, okay? And it's counterintuitive to what a lot of people think here. The idea is if I put the blade, come here, like that, okay? We've got helis that rotate, have the heads rotate clockwise. So imagine I'm going fast in a forward direction. This blade is moving forward, okay? This blade is moving backwards. So if I'm traveling at 100 miles an hour in the airframe, right? The airframe's going 100 miles an hour, and the tips are going, let's say, just for round numbers, 150 miles an hour. It's actually quite faster than that, but for illustrative purposes, then this tip is going 150 plus the 100 that the airframe is moving. So this tip's going 250 miles an hour. This tip is going 100 that the airframe is moving minus the 150 that it's moving. So the relative airspeed over this tip is only 50 miles per hour. And so the problem with that is what happens when we take an airfoil and we start putting it at higher angles of attack, especially when we're at low airspeed. We stall, right? The classic stall problem. So that's exactly what happens on our blades. On this retreating tip, and we call it retreating because it's moving back around to the back of the helicopter. On this retreating tip, when we're going fast enough on the head, and we start putting a bunch of pitch in, we can get it to stall. Think about it. The pitch that the blades are actually at are a combination of collective and the cyclic that you've got put in. Okay, so when you are flying, so let's think about this here. You're flying and you feel like the heli's starting to kind of raise. I'm not talking pitch up, but it's starting to porpoise a little bit. What's your instinct? Put the nose down. What does it do when you put the nose down? Right? Put the nose down, this blade adds more pitch with all the collective that you've already got in there. So now I am putting more pitch into an already serious situation because of the low airflow speed over this tip, and I hit a critical angle or go above it, I stall. And because the helicopter is fantastic in the physics world and always responds to things 90 degrees after the input, that means this stalls, and the response is when this is over the tail boom, and the response is it pops up. Okay, so that's the physics behind why retreating blade stall is called a pitch up. Okay, so counterintuitive. Do not ever put forward elevator in if it's tending to porpoise. Stop and re-CG and tune your heli to make sure you don't have to do that. CG is the key. Second thing, most people are afraid to put more head speed in and would rather tune the pitch up first. Completely opposite and wrong. The more pitch you give in collective or cyclic, the more chance you're going to have of getting yourselves into a blade stall situation. So always increase the head speed first, and then as you get better, increase the pitch. The head speed actually helps because the more head speed you've got relative to the forward speed of the heli, the further away you're going to get that tip from blade stall. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? And then we'll quick do drag racing. It's not nearly as technical.
That drag racing scares the crap out of the speed stuff.
We'll see. I think you're going to like it. It's a lot of fun. So drag racing, new class for MHSFA. We just debuted it at Orlando Heli Blowout back in December of 2017. It is a step back from the formality and all of the rules that come with our Speed Cup. A lot of people complain about the Speed Cup because there are so many things to remember. It's a 200-meter course on the big helis. It's got 100-meter pre-stages. It's got to be between 5 and 35 meters in altitude, and you can't have any angles coming into it, so on and so forth. Drag racing, it's your classic street racing, run what you brung. Any heli against any heli. It's a 100-meter course. We do that deliberately because we don't want it to be about the machine. We want it to be about the pilot. Frankly, 90% of the win comes on the takeoff, getting off the line. So the idea behind it is we get you set up, left lane, right lane. 2 helis get spooled up, full speed. It is dangerous, which means you need to make sure your helis are in tip-top shape and things aren't going to come apart. We do a standard 3 countdown, so 3, 2, 1, go. And then you guys take off and you fly down the course. You can see it's going to start right there at that pylon and start and run down the course to the back large pylon over there, that's the 100 meters. There's a gate judge back there, a line judge, and they just say left lane or right lane 1. That's it. There's no times, there's no speeds. Best 2 out of 3 in each heat. If we can get a Sweet 16, then we get that narrowed down over a few rounds to the final winner. Drag racing is nice because you don't have to do much in terms of tuning the heli out of 3D. The gains are all about what you're looking for. In fact, depending on the model and the head speed you're turning, you may want to up the tail gain a little bit so that it holds off the line when you punch it. You don't want it to kick out. Does that make sense? And then it's all about the the start here. So the idea, if you look at the way the helis are supposed to do this, is you want to get an initial kick of pitch to get it up. Okay, and you get that disc as flat to the flight direction as possible. A lot of people you'll actually see kick up and then pull out that way. All right, that's not a smooth increase in collective. That's a punch to get it off the ground, and then you hold, and then you start feathering the collective in as you go down. The reason for that is that what you want to do initially is you want to get a punch up, you get it flat, and then you want to start pulling that elevator up so that you can keep it moving flat and straight. Get it all centered and on line, and then you're adding collective as you go from there. Okay? The most common mistakes, one is not a problem, one is a huge problem, is either I pop it, but I don't tip it over far enough. That's what we call vertical drag races. You're gonna lose, but if the other guy does it, then maybe we can figure out who won by getting to the top quicker. The other one is what we saw Duncan do at OHB, and that's an undercut. So that's a pop, and then toe pick the blades coming back around through elevator. That's catastrophic. Actually, no, it was not Duncan. It was Jonathan. It was Jonathan, his brother, flying Duncan's bird. I think it was a 3-blade Black Thunder 700. And he toe picked it coming out of elevator, and it yard sailed. We started the field on fire with lipos. It was a disaster. So don't do that. Always err on the opposite side, which is vertical drag races. Say again?
Happened in spring fling with the N7. Remember that?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
He angled too far in. When he started, he went straight in.
Yep, that's true. Yeah, so you don't want to do that. Most people tend not to do it because they're so afraid of that outcome that they just pop it up in the air. Okay? So what I actually suggest for people that want to try the drag race, don't go full in initially, okay? Go out and practice from an air start, okay? So what I'll do, and I do this as I'm checking new drag racing machines out. I don't want to start off the ground because there are too many consequences. I'll get it into a hover, make sure it's already checked out. Same thing with speed because we're going to high head speeds. Get it into a hover, maybe 3-4 feet off the ground. You know how when you get close enough, you get into that ground effect, right? And it just kind of sits there, okay? Get yourself in that position and then do the countdown in your head. 3, 2, 1, punch it. Now you've got a few feet of margin between you and the ground. You can be a little bit more aggressive with the takeoff and just see how it feels. Okay? Once you get to the end, the best way to do it is to pull up like you're going to do a loop and then kind of tail slide back out and bring yourself in tail in. If you're super comfortable with orientation like that, a long distance away, because we are a football field away, then you do whatever you want. I mean, Bert, he hot dogs it a little bit sometimes and we'll pull up and then kind of loop back around and pull it back in. I've seen the Kyles do that as well. Don't get crazy. Do what you're comfortable with. And if you need to be slow and kind of bring it back carefully, then do that too. That's okay. Bring it. Thank you, Michael. Yes, bring it back on a lower head speed for sure. And then when you get it, sit back down in the pit. You can spool it back up when we're ready. Any questions on drag racing? No? Okay. All right. So I think that's it for the seminar. If you guys are interested in either flying just for fun or if you're going to end up competing tomorrow, then bring some stuff over and I'll spot for you and we'll get you tuned up and ready to go. And then I'm slowly but surely going to attempt to get this heli ready to actually fly. And then maybe we can do some demos. If not, it's fine. We've got other people that... Shaggy has done drag racing and Speed Cup recently at Spring Fling. So he's got the skill and he can demo it as well. I have the TDR2. It is flyable.
I want to see it fly so bad. I've never seen it fly. Yes.
We'll see what we can do. Okay. Any other questions? Cool. Thanks, guys.